Hi, happy Thursday. Okay, so I have been kicked out of my living room. That's normally where I record my videos, so my wall is different today because I am in my bedroom recording today. Grayson and Jace were watching Iron Man, so what do? So I am in here. I brought my little sign with me. So today is Tell Me Something Good Thursday. So I want you to tell me something good that has happened to you this week, or tell me some good news. Tell me something good. I want to know something that you know that is really good or fun or exciting or anything like that. So tell me some good news. And I will, since I don't have my email address behind me, I'll put it down in the description. So you can send it to my email or Class Dojo, or find me on Facebook and send it through Messenger. So find some way to send me your answers. Okay, so we read chapters 6 through 10 yesterday, and the big main point of the whole thing that happened yesterday was that Despereaux was caught sitting at the foot of the king and letting Princess P touch him, and those are big rules in the mouse community that you do not break. You don't sit at the foot of the king, and you don't let a human touch you. They don't know, the other mice do not know that Despereaux talked to her. They do not know that Despereaux spoke, because that is the biggest no-no of all. The mice do not speak to humans. They don't let them know that they can speak, that they can talk. So Despereaux's dad called a meeting with the Mouse Society, whatever their big thing is called, and the most very honored head mouse said that they were going to give him a chance to, basically apologize for the way he acted and what he did, and go to the basement or the cellar with the rats with a warm heart, like knowing that he had apologized for what he did, and they said that he could go on knowing that he did the right thing by apologizing. Or he can go with what they referred to as a black heart, or, not apologizing for what he did and not ever feel like, he did the right thing. However, that's not going to be how we learned that Despereaux chose not to, apologize. He said, no, I don't feel bad for the way I feel about Princess P. I love her. I'm going to honor her forever. So that leads us to chapter 11. And I believe I will be able to read through 15 today. So because that will end us through the first part of the book. So then we'll start the second part of the book tomorrow. So once again, there are some pictures today. So when I get to the pictures, I'll do my best to show them on the camera. Okay, so chapter 11 is called The Thread Master Cometh. And remember that if Mama Mouse speaks, Miss G does not speak French, so she may not say it correctly. So just bear with me. Okay, so chapter 11, The Thread Master Cometh. When Despereaux came to, he heard the drum. His father was beating a rhythm that had much more boom and much less tat. Together, Lester and the drum produced an ominous sound that went something like this. Boom, 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 tat. Boom, 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 tat. Make way for the thread, cried a mouse who was pushing a wooden spool of red thread through the crowd. Make way for the thread. Boom, 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 tat, went the drum. To the dungeon, shouted the mice. Despereaux lay on his back, blinking his eyes. How, he wondered, had things gone so terribly wrong? Wasn't it a good thing to love? In the story, in the book, love was a very good thing. Because the knight loved the fair maiden, he was able to rescue her. They lived happily ever after. It said so in the book. They were the last words on the page. Happily ever after. Despereaux was certain that he had read those exact words time and time again. Lying on the floor with the drum beating and the mice shouting and the threadmaster calling out, "Make way, make way!" Despereaux had a sudden, chilling thought. Had some other mouse eaten the words that spoke the truth? Did the knight and the fair maiden really not live happily ever after? Reader, Do you believe that there is such a thing as happily ever after? Or, like Despereaux, have you, too, begun to question the possibility of happy endings? Happily ever after, whispered Despereaux. Happily ever after, he said again as the spool of thread came to a stop beside him. The thread, the thread, the thread, murmured the mice. I'm sorry, said the mouse behind the spool, but I have to ask you to stand up. I have to do my job. Despereaux got slowly to his feet. On your hind legs, please, said the threadmaster. It's the rules. Despereaux stood on his hind legs. Thank you, said the mouse. I appreciate it. While Despereaux watched, the threadmaster unwound a length of red thread from the spool and tied a loop. Just enough for the neck, muttered the mouse. No more, no less. That's what the last threadmaster taught me. Enough thread for the neck. He looked up at Despereaux and then back down at the loop of thread. And you, my friend, have a small neck. The threadmaster raised his arms and put them around Despereaux's neck. He leaned in close to Despereaux, and he smelled of celery. He could feel the threadmaster's breath in his ear as he worked at tightening the thread. Is she beautiful? The threadmaster whispered. What? Asked Despereaux. Shh. Is the princess beautiful? The Princess P? Yes. Oh, she is lovely beyond all imagining, said Despereaux. Just right, the threadmaster said. He drew back and he nodded his head. A lovely princess, just so, like a fairy tale, and you love her as a knight loves a maiden. You love her with a courtly love, a love that is based on bravery and courtesy and honor and devotion. Just so. Well, how do you know that? Despereaux said. How do you know about fairy tales? Shh. The mouse leaned in close, and Despereaux smelled celery again, green and alive. Be brave, friend, whispered the threadmaster. Be brave for the princess. And then he stepped back and turned and shouted, Fellow mice, the thread has been tied. The thread has been knotted. A roar of approval went up from the crowd. Despereaux squared his shoulders. He had made a decision. He would do as the threadmaster had suggested. He would be brave for the princess. Even if, reader, could it be true? There was no such thing as happily ever after. So right there is where the threadmaster mouse is muttering just enough for the neck. No more, no less. Chapter 12. Adieu. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tat disappeared and it became nothing but boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Lester used only his tail, bringing it down with great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The room full of mice fell silent, expectant, waiting. And as Despereaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck and the 14 members of the Mouse Council perched on the bricks above him, 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads. They were slits for their eyes. We, said the bigger of the 2 mice, will escort you to the dungeon. Despereaux, Antoinette called out. Oh, my Despereaux. Remember, Antoinette is his mother. Despereaux looked out into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she had put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice put a paw on Despereaux's shoulder. It's time, said the one on the left, the first hood. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. He is my son, she said. I want to have a last word with my son. Despereaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being a disappointment. Please, said Antoinette, what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby? Ma'am, said the first hood. His voice was deep and slow. You don't want to know. I want to know. I want to know. He is my child, the child of my heart, the last of my mice babies. The hooded mice said nothing. Tell me, said Antoinette. The rats, said the first. The rats, said the second. Yes, yes, oi, the rats, what of them? The rats will eat him, said the second hood. Oh, said Antoinette, mon Dieu. At the thought of being eaten by rats, Despereaux forgot about being brave. He forgot about not being a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another faint, but his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it, and she executed a beautiful, flawless swoon, landing right at Despereaux's feet. "Well, now you've done it," said the first hood. "Yeah, it doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over her. We have a job to do. Nobody's mother's gonna stop us. To the dungeon!" "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood, but his voice, so deep and certain a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Despereaux and tugged him forward, and the two hoods and Despereaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began again to chant, "To the dungeon! To the dungeon! To the dungeon!" And the drumbeat continued. Boom, 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 boom. And Despereaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of her faint and shouted one word to her child. The word, reader, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Well, don't bother with your dictionary, I'll tell you. Adieu is the French word for farewell. Farewell is not the word that you would like to hear from your mother as you are being led to the dungeon by two oversized mice in black hoods. Words that you would like to hear are, "Take me instead," or "I will go to the dungeon in my son's place." There is a great deal of comfort in those words. But, reader, there is no time for comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that, in any language, is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing. Chapter 13. Perfidy Unlimited. Together, the three mice traveled down, down, down. The thread around Despereaux's neck was tight, and he felt as though it were choking him. He tugged at it with one paw. "Don't touch the thread," barked the second hood. "Yeah," echoed the first hood. "Don't touch the thread." They moved quickly, and whenever Despereaux slowed, one of the two hoods poked him in the shoulder and told him to keep moving. They went through holes in the wall and down golden stairs. They went past rooms with doors that were closed and doors that were flung wide open. The three mice traveled across marble floors and under heavy velvet drapes. They moved through warm patches of sunlight and dark pools of shade. This, thought Despereaux, was the world he was leaving behind, the world that he knew and loved. And somewhere in it, the Princess P was laughing and smiling and clapping her hands to music, unaware of Despereaux's fate. That he would not be able to let the princess know what had become of him. It seemed suddenly unbearable to the mouse. "Well, would it be possible for me to have one last word with the princess?" Despereaux asked. "A word?" said the second hood. "You want to have a word with the princess." "A word," said the second hood. "You want a word with a human." "I want to tell her what has happened to me." "Oh, geez," said the first hood. He stopped and stamped a paw on the floor in frustration. "Cripes, you can't learn, can you?" The voice was terribly familiar to Despereaux. "Furlough?" he said. "What?" said the first hood irritably. Despereaux shuddered. His own brother was delivering him to the dungeon. His heart stopped beating and shrunk into a small, cold, disbelieving pebble. But then, just as quickly, it leapt alive again, beating with hope. "Furlough," Despereaux said, and he took one of his brother's paws in his own. "Please, let me go. Please, I'm your brother." Furlough rolled his eyes. He took his paw to Despereaux's. "No," he said, "no way." "Please," said Despereaux. "No," said Furlough, "rules are rules." Reader, do you recall the word perfidy? As our story progresses, perfidy becomes an ever more appropriate word, doesn't it? Perfidy was certainly the word that was in Despereaux's mind as the mice finally approached the narrow, steep stairs that led to the black hole of the dungeon. They stood, the three mice, two with hoods and one without, and contemplated the abyss before them. And then Furlough stood up on his hind legs and placed his right paw over his heart. "For the good of the castle mice," he announced to the darkness, "we deliver this day to the dungeon a mouse in need of punishment. He is, according to the laws we have established, wearing the red thread of death." "The red thread of death?" repeated Despereaux in a small voice. Wearing the red thread of death was a terrible phrase, but the mouse didn't have long to consider its implications, because He was suddenly pushed from behind by the hooded mice. The push was a strong one, and it sent Despereaux flying down the stairs into the dungeon. And as he tumbled, whisker over tail, through the darkness, there were only 2 words in his mind. One was perfidy, and the other word that he clung to was P. Perfidy, P. Perfidy, P. These were the words that pinwheeled through Despereaux's mind as his body descended into the darkness. Okay, so here is a picture, and it is of the hooded mice taking Despereaux, and then he realizes that one of them is his brother. Chapter 14, Darkness. Despereaux lay on his back at the bottom of the steps and touched the bones in his body one by one. They were all there, and amazingly, they were unbroken. He got to his feet and became aware of the terrible, foul, extremely insulting smell. The dungeon, reader, stank. It stank of despair and suffering and hopelessness, which is to say that the dungeon smelled of rats. And it was so dark. Despereaux had never before encountered darkness so awful, so all-encompassing. The darkness had a physical presence, as if it were a being all in its own. The mouse held one small paw up in front of his whiskers. He could not see it. And he had the truly alarming thought that perhaps he, Despereaux Tilling, did not even exist. "Oh my," he said out loud. His voice echoed in the smelly darkness. "Perfidy," said Despereaux, just to hear his voice again, just to assure himself that he did exist. "P," said Despereaux, and the name of his beloved was immediately swallowed up by the darkness. He shivered, he shook, he sneezed. His teeth chattered. He longed for his handkerchief. He grabbed a hold of his tail. It took him a long, frightened moment to even locate his tail. So absolute was the darkness. Just to have something, anything, to hold on to. He considered fainting. He deemed it the only reasonable response to the situation in which he found himself, but then he remembered the words of the Thread Master. Honor, courtesy, devotion, and bravery. "I will be brave," thought Despereaux. "I will try to be brave like the knight in shining armor. I will be brave for the Princess P." Wow, how best for him to be brave. He cleared his throat. He let go of his tail. He stood up straighter. "Once upon a time," he said out loud to the darkness. He said these words because they were the best, the most powerful words that he knew, and just the saying of them comforted him. "Once upon a time," he said again, feeling a tiny bit braver, "there was a knight, and he wore, always, an armor of shining silver." "Once upon a time," boomed a voice from the darkness, "a knight in shining silver? What does a mouse know of such things?" The voice, the loudest voice that Despereaux had ever heard, could only, he assumed, belong to the world's largest rat. Despereaux's small, overworked heart stopped beating, and for the second time that day, the mouse fainted. Chapter 15, Light. When Despereaux awoke, he was cupped in the large, calloused hand of a human, and he was staring into the fire of one match, and beyond the match there was a large, dark eye looking directly at him. "A mouse with red thread," boomed the voice. "Oh yes, Gregory knows the way of mice and rats. Gregory knows, and Gregory has his own thread, marking him. See here, mouse?" And the match was held to a candle, and the candle sputtered to life, and Despereaux saw that there was a rope tied around the man's ankle. "Here is the difference between us. Gregory's rope saves him, and your thread will be the death of you." The man blew the candle out, and the darkness descended, and the man's hand closed more tightly around Despereaux, and Despereaux felt his beleaguered heart start up a crazy rhythm of fear. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Well, the answer to that question, mouse, is Gregory. You are talking to Gregory, the jailer, who has been buried here, keeping watch over this dungeon for decades, for centuries, for eons, for eternities. You are talking to Gregory the jailer, who, in the richest of ironies, is nothing but a prisoner here himself." "Oh," said Despereaux. May I get down, Gregory?" "The mouse wants to know if Gregory the jailer will let him go. Listen to Gregory, mouse. You do not want to be let go. Here in this dungeon, you are in the treacherous, dark heart of the world, and if Gregory was to release you, the twistings and turnings and dead ends and false doorways of this place would swallow you for all of eternity. Only Gregory and the rats can find their way through this maze. The rats because they know, because the way of it mirrors their own dark hearts. And Gregory because the rope is forever tied to his ankle to guide him back to the beginning. Gregory would let you go, but you would only beg him to take you up again. The rats are coming for you, you see. They are? Listen, said Gregory. You can hear their tails dragging through the muck and filth. You can hear them filing their nails in their teeth. They're coming for you. They're coming to take you apart, piece by piece. Despereaux listened, and he was quite certain that he heard the nails and teeth of the rats, the sound of a sharp thing being made sharper still. They will strip all the fur from your flesh, and all the flesh from your bones. And when they are done with you, there will be nothing left except red thread. Red thread and bones. Gregory has seen it many times, the tragic end of a mouse. But I need to live, said Despereaux. I can't die. You cannot die. Ah, that is lovely. He says he cannot die. Gregory closed his hand more tightly around Despereaux. And why would that be, Mouse? Why is it that you cannot die? Well, because I am in love. I love somebody, and it is my duty to serve her. Love, said Gregory. Love. Hark you, I will show you the twisted results of love. Another match was struck. The candle was lit again, and Gregory held it up so that its flame illuminated a massive, towering, teetering pile of spoons and kettles and soup bowls. Look on that, Mouse, said Gregory. That is the monument to the foolishness of love. What is it? Asked Despereaux. He stared at the great tower that reached up, up, up into the blackness. Well, what it looks like. Spoons and bowls and kettles. All of them gathered here as hard evidence of the pain of loving a living thing. The king loved the queen, and the queen died. This monstrosity, this junk heap, is the result of love. I don't understand, said Despereaux. And you will not understand until you lose what you love. But enough about love, said Gregory. He blew out the candle. We will talk instead about your life, and how Gregory will save it, if you so desire. Well, why would you save me? Despereaux asked. Have you saved any other mice? Never, said Gregory. Not one. Why would you save me then? Because you, Mouse, can tell Gregory a story. Stories are light. Light is precious in a world so dark. Begin at the beginning. Tell Gregory a story. Make some light. And because Despereaux wanted very much to live, he said, Once upon a time. Yes, said Gregory happily. He raised his hand higher and then higher still until Despereaux's whiskers brushed against his leathery, time-worn ear. Go on, Mouse, said Gregory. Tell Gregory a story. And it was in this way that Despereaux became the only mouse sent to the dungeon, whom the rats did not reduce to a pile of bones and a piece of red thread. It was in this way that Despereaux was saved. Reader, if you don't mind, this is where we will leave our small mouse for now, in the dark of the dungeon, in the hand of an old jailer, telling a story to save himself. It is time for us to turn our attention elsewhere. Time for us, reader, to speak of rats. And one rat in particular. The end of the first book. Okay, so here is a picture of Gregory where he's lifting Despereaux to his ear so he can tell him the story. Okay, so we are stopping there for today, and tomorrow we will start the second book, which I'm going to have to look up that nice word and see how to pronounce it because I have a feeling it's repeated a couple times. So until then, don't forget that today is Tell Me Something Good Thursday. So tell me some good news you know. Tell me a good story. Tell me something happy or exciting. Just send me some cheerful, happy news. Okay, and I will link my email down below, or you can send it to Class Dojo or find me on Facebook. Okay, I will see you tomorrow. It's Friday almost. Okay, have a good night.